Well, let's get more on those talks likely to be underway in Washington early Thursday morning. Adam Lockyer from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney joins me now here in the studio. Adam, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Time is starting to run out, obviously. We're all aware of that. Many investors, though, do still feel there will be some sort of a scaled-down deal done at the last second, or at least at the latest early in January. Is that looking likely?
It's now looking as though there's not going to be a grand bargain. So ever since the election back in early November, people have been talking about a grand bargain. So a complete resolution to the fiscal cliff crisis. That's now not going to happen. We're just out of time. So it's going to be a band-aid solution, and we're still looking for what is that going to look like.
Okay, so will we see it before the December 31st deadline, though?
It's even a band-aid solution is going to be difficult to reach now. So Obama has come back, has cut his holidays short, but yet the lawmakers in Congress are still starting to trickle back. So they're not even going to be back sitting in Congress until at least Thursday night, their time. So time is getting very short to be able to cut any sort of deal, and the two parties are still very far away from reaching any sort of agreement.
So what are the potential consequences of the Democrats and Republicans not coming to some sort of resolution?
So we can break this down into three different parts. So the first part is just the debt ceiling. This is what we had a big crisis about earlier on in the year. Now what happens there is that the Treasury can move money around from one pocket to the other, but they can't take on any more debt without Congress's approval. So the lights aren't going to go out on DC for at least 2 months, but then the crisis point will hit within 2 months after that because of the debt ceiling. Now then we have the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff can be broken into two different parts. The first part is the expiry of the Bush-era tax cuts. So they're all due to expire on the 1st of January, and what will happen then is that pretty much everybody within the United States will have a tax hike, which is going to suck out about $450 billion out of the US economy for 2013. In addition to that, the fiscal cliff also includes austerity measures. Now, the austerity measures were tied to the debt ceiling debates earlier in 2012. And so both the US government will be sucking money out of the economy because people have less money, but the US government will also be spending less money.
Okay. All right, so quite a few different issues there. I guess there is a bit of fear that with Europe, Japan and the UK all sort of reportedly possibly entering recession next year, if we don't see some sort of arrangement on both the debt ceiling and the fiscal cliff, could we see the US also head that way?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question that unless there is some sort of political resolution to the fiscal cliff, the United States will enter into recession next year. So their economy has been puttering along at about 2.5% GDP growth in 2012, but most forecasts say that if we go over the fiscal cliff and we're there for 12 months, it's going to detract about 3.5% GDP. So we'll go deep into recession in the United States. Now, that's not really the discussion we're having because nobody thinks there's going to be 12 months without any sort of political resolution to this crisis. It's, well, what happens if the US goes over fiscal cliff and they're there for 1 month or they're there for 2 months? What's that going to do to the US economy?
Yeah. The longer it goes on, though, the waiting and this divisive negotiations, it's obviously having some sort of a damaging impact, isn't it? Not just on markets, but on business and consumer sentiment, which we seem to be starting to see already. Oh,
we've seen this Christmas already. So, I mean, forecasts were hoping that US spending over the Christmas period was going to be up over last year, and it hasn't. So that's been disappointing, and the markets have reacted to that today.
So looking at the recent retail numbers also out of the US, do you think that shoppers may have deliberately spent less this season because they fear that these looming tax hikes are coming?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Because there's so much political uncertainty now that even Main Street is starting to be uncertain about what's going to happen in 2013, and they're starting to be a bit more cautious with how they're spending money.
All right. Okay, so it's looking a little bit bleak and still very uncertain at the moment, but hopefully you think we will see a band-aid solution sometime in January, possibly.
Probably, yes.
But it might not be enough.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Adam Farrow, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
You.
Really appreciate your time.